Hey YA, welcome to Cruise this week, where we are now going to be talking about part 2 on our conversation of influence. And I have some great influential friends here with me. I've got Hannah to my right, your left if you're looking on your television screen. And I have Kemi and Jake. Welcome guys, how are we?
Good, good.
Great, yes, it's good.
Loving the t-shirt, Hannah. I'm a big Maleficent.
Oh, are you? Oh my.
I actually am. I actually love it.
Love it. I'm obsessed, absolutely obsessed. She's an actual queen.
Very influential.
Already been influenced. Now,
Yeah,
Yes,
big
there we
time.
go. Straight up.
this is good. So we're obviously talking about influence, which can be quite a, not such like a touchable topic. It's just like not something that's really seen and that we
Yeah.
kind of know what
Yeah,
is sometimes. So we're just like, oh, what is it? A lot of people are kind of like, how do I get it? That kind of thing. But I guess for us as a people of God, we kind of really need to understand where we get our influence from and then how that affects our lives.
Yeah.
So I've been reading this week in Acts 4:13 to start with, where it says, now when they saw the boldness of Peter and John, this is after they got arrested, they perceived that they were uneducated, untrained men and marveled, and they realized that they had been with Jesus. So these are two guys who just absolutely don't have any education, who, you know, but then obviously showing something that they're like, well, you didn't get it from any of the systems or anything that we know. You got it from a guy who we absolutely condemned. But then Jesus also says in John 15, he says, no longer do I call you servants. A servant does not know what his master is doing, but I've called you friends. For all things that I've heard from the Father, I have made known to you.
Yeah.
Which is good. So it's like ultimately, you know, we're all influenced through what we want, right? But we all want the same things. We all want freedom, peace, joy,
Yeah,
hope.
right.
So it's, I guess, like, how can we make sure we're not getting influenced through what we want by the wrong things or, you know, through
Yeah.
the right things?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's a bit of a struggle sometimes, because even the idea of influence, us as individuals, we're going to influence people whether we like it or not. Whether it be, I used to be completely influenced by my sister, my older sister. Like, she'd fall down the stairs because she fell down the stairs, and I'd throw myself down the stairs because I wanted to be like her.
Right.
So don't do that at home. But yeah, so whether we like it or not, I'm sure she didn't fall down the stairs and think, oh, fingers crossed someone wants to be like me. But whether we like it or not, we're influential because we're alive and we have our own brains and we have our own ways of doing things.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I feel like that's what we've got to realise. We're like, and we're influential wherever we are. We can sometimes think it's through social media, by having a blue tick, so many followers, that's what makes me influential, but it's literally in university, in your workplace, in the coffee shop, like whoever you interact with. I heard it said that it's easier to influence 10,000 than one person.
Yeah.
Wow.
10,000 is
Right.
like, you can just put something out there, post it out there, think,
Yeah.
I've influenced all those people. Not that I got 10,000 followers, I'm struggling there. But whereas the one-to-one person, like speaking to the bus driver, speaking to the person who's serving you at the coffee shop, that's harder because it takes a more real, authentic self-view to actually have that one-to-one influence.
Yeah. I think it's crazy how with influence especially, like it just takes one moment. If you think about the encounters in life that stick with you the most, it just takes one moment of a conversation where sometimes you'll go back to a friend and you'll be like, oh yeah, you said this, and they're like, you what? Like I don't remember that.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh gosh, well that just stuck with me because we have selective memory of what stands out to us. But even wherever Jesus went, it was always one encounter.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Whenever he would pass by, people would be like, Jesus, stay for longer, but it would be one encounter that would change your life. So with every breath we breathe, we're glorifying him through that. And it's just like, I think it goes back to the point of being like, I'm not of my own. Like I am of the Lord's completely. Like we put limits on ourselves, and sometimes I'm just thinking, God's just saying to us, oh, I'm sorry, who are you to determine how fruitful you become?
Yeah,
Who are you to determine how much influence you have? Who are you to say that you can do this and you can't do this when I'm the biggest influence, I'm the biggest mind who's created you, I've designed you. And it's just, like you guys said, like humility.
100%.
Stripping back of who you are,
I love what you said about that exchange with the friend, because I couldn't help but think about how we hold on to what, like what you said,
Yes.
Jessie, what we need. We hold on to what we need. And I feel like we find ourselves in situations that are so saturated, so intense, especially with 2020 being what it is.
Yeah.
We find ourselves in situations where we're expected to have, or we expect ourselves to have instant reactions.
Yeah.
But actually, I love John 11 because Jesus being an awesome example anyhow of how we live our lives and how we navigate situations. In John 11, he was faced with news of a dear friend, Lazarus, being sick, right? And should I open my Bible? I should.
Oh, please. Please, Kenny.
I'm the only one with a closed Bible, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to open it. But I love it. So, John, I have a great relationship
You got to read that?
John 11. I'm going to read it.
Do you want her glasses? Check.
I can see it. All right, in verse 3 it says, so the two sisters sent a message to Jesus telling him, Lord, your dear friend is sick. But when Jesus heard about it, he said, Lazarus' sickness will not end in death. No, it happened for the glory of God, so that the Son of God will receive glory from this. So although Jesus loved Martha, Mary, and Lazarus, he stayed where he was for the next 2 days. And I find that so interesting because he heard this, he spoke life over it,
Yeah.
and then he stayed where he was.
Yeah.
How many instances it challenges me to be like, hey, do I listen? Do I wait on God in every situation? Am I faced with stuff and I see it and it's so in my face and people are looking at me for what you're gonna do, what you're gonna say, what you're gonna post? Do I stop and think, okay, this is the information I've got. What is the truth that I know? What have I learned from my relationship with God?
Yeah.
And how am I gonna receive this? Am I gonna be still? And then he went about going about the Father's business in how he navigated that situation with Lazarus. Read John 11 if you want to find out what happens next.
Yeah.
But it's so significant that he heard that news, he spoke life over it, and he stayed where he was.
Yeah.
That's so significant. And I find in the situations that we face today, in the way that things are so quick and choppy and information flying our way left, right, and centre, what are we doing? Are we actually steadying ourselves and being still in that?
Yeah.
Are we humbling ourselves in those situations?
Yeah. I think it's crazy how, Kemi, when you were talking about being still, I'm a little bit biased, let me not lie, because I love the story of Esther. I remember when I was, I think I must have been about 4 or 5, our church, obviously, because you don't do Halloween parties, we had a Hallelujah party, and I dressed up as Queen Esther, and that's just stayed with me, that's
Right.
Nice.
I strive to be. So the story of Queen Esther, she does exactly the same. She talks about how she wants to be still before she acts. She goes through a period of 3 days of prayer and fasting. And I just think it's mad how she understood how her influence was where she was. As a woman in society anyway, she was restricted. You know, she would have been put to death if she even told the king that she was a Jew undercover.
You're right.
She already had those restrictions on her, but in the waiting, one thing that's actually spoken to me recently is I've realized that waiting on God doesn't mean waiting around.
Right.
Yeah.
Waiting is in the day-to-day, in the progression, and that's what she was doing. But talking about influence, she didn't even realize how far her influence extended. So long story short, she and her cousin were in the Persian kingdom. They were undercover, and her influence meant that the people who wanted to kill her, the king had favor on her, despite the fact that she should have been put to death. You know, her enemies were killed. The king ended up being like, worship Esther's king, Esther's God. And she had so much favor, and she didn't even get to see, because she was trapped in there. She didn't see what went behind the kingdom walls, but that's what makes me visualize influence like a river. It's a never-ending flow. You don't see where it goes. That one thing that you would have said sticks with people, just like how the other way around, as we said, like those conversations, it sticks with us. And I love what Owen McManus says. I was reading The Way of the Warrior recently. He talks about influence like a river and how, like water, it can't be separated. You can try and separate water, but it's all one mass, ultimately, and it refreshes and it revives, and that's what we should strive to be. Yeah.
I think that, like, being still, like exactly what you both are saying is like, we're so rushed into decisions.
Yeah.
I think that's where, like, them becomes our own. And I think like, you had a good story of, like, when you were influenced the other way, probably because you didn't have time to think.
Negative influence. You're 4, which is like what, 10?
Yeah, you just
bear that in mind with this story,
I'd be like,
because
10.
But Valentine's Day, for us in school, you'd step into the classroom. Maureen was not at my school at the time. Otherwise, it would have been us, but it's different. Different girl at the time. We had these little drawers, like plastic drawers, and you'd go in that morning and you have all your name on it, pull out and see what's there. Like, I never, you go 1, 2, 3, nothing. You have 4, there was something in there. Little note, little heart chocolates from Charlotte. Ooh. And at the time, I was like, inside I was buzzing, but then straight away, all the boys come over, they're like, oh, Jake, what'd you get, what'd you get? I'm like, oh, nothing, just some chocolates. They're like, what are you gonna do with them? I'm like, what do you mean, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna take them to the schoolyard, have a little date, eat them with Charlotte. That's what I thought I would do, but actually, they were like, oh, just, you don't want them, like, throw them in the bin, get rid of them. So, what? Didn't want to do it, but I just kind of took them out and just strolled by a bin, dropped them, and long story short, I got in trouble. Her dad came in, I sat in with a t-shirt, and she cried. But all I wanted to do was go to the schoolyard, have a little date, share the chocolates. But that bad influence from the boys, it meant that happened. But it was year 4, so I've moved on from there. I've learned.
Delivered.
Yeah.
I think that's perfect, because it's like before you had a chance to process what you're doing, like the voices rushed in, and then you were overcome with like what we all want. You're like, oh, I want to be accepted and like to stay in. So it's like, I'm going to make this decision, but it's like what Jesus said and like what you were saying. It's like, no, I need to still myself, remove myself from a time. And it's like, how do we do that? Sometimes the voices do come rushing in, but it's like, how do we do that in our soul, in our minds, in our heart, in the middle of things? I don't know, it feels like we need to build in a way that we can do that in the middle of our life, right?
Yeah, I think it's knowing literally who you are. I read like influence, it's an inside job. Like what happens in you then determines what happens through you. So it's all about your character. And I look at someone like David, he was someone who literally a man after God's own heart, and what took him, I don't know, from this kid in a field looking after sheep to then becoming a king was literally over time, no matter what came his way, no matter what situations he was in, it was that character. Like he was always after God, after the ways of him. So he knew whatever situation I'm stepping into, I've got a solid foundation, so I don't have to react to anything. If crisis comes, my character will reveal itself, and my character is after God's own heart.
Another thing that I think is actually something that we all deal with every single day is that we are crippled by fear. We want to be influencers, and sometimes we think, I only have influence when I reach this final goal, you know? But in the meantime, I'm just waiting, and I feel, okay, being completely honest with you guys, I know a lot of my friends would have heard this story, but I'm going to say it again. I've labelled myself so much this quarantine time as just being stagnant, and that word was a label so toxic that I'd put on myself, because I just labelled myself as not being good enough, stagnant. What am I actually doing? And I feel like influence, of course, is a daily thing, but we're crippled by the words that people throw around, like, oh, what are you doing to reach God's will? You know, your influence, God's will, God's perfect plan. And again, reading this book, Erwin McManus was talking about how, he says, historically, we've been taught to think of the will of God from a linear perspective. His will becomes almost more of a tightrope that we either walk on or fall off. And it's this kind of limited view of the future that causes us to speak in terms of God's perfect will. So, for example, once you've fallen off the tightrope of his perfect will, all you're left with is a merciful version of a divine plan B. Now, how scary is that? Because we're like, I don't want to go a step out of line. And then it goes here, it says, it just makes perfect sense that an infinite God would have an infinite number of beautiful futures waiting us. How crazy is that? And we're called to live freely, you know? As we were talking about earlier, just exploring life. We are called to be free. Some people are like, oh, but I'm not creative. But God's like, yeah, but the most creative mind has created you. You know, we're called to be fluid and dynamic, like water, like that influence, inseparable, unbreakable, because God's with us. And again, going back to that whole thing where God's like, I'm sorry, who are you to limit who you are? Who are you to tell yourself who you are, and who are you to decide how fruitful you become? You know? And when God's on your side, it's just so reassuring. Your influence is right here, right now, as soon as you turn off this video, you know?
And like exactly what Jake was saying as well, like influence is an inside job. So, and I think like any dictator in the past and anyone who's wanted to control people know that they just have to appeal to the things on the inside that are wrong, to manipulate that to get the things that they want. And you know, this is just start another conversation of view into, I guess, what we're talking about. But ultimately, the ultimate influence is Jesus, and we cannot move past Jesus. Every conversation that you have now in your cruise, where you are with your people, let's be talking about Jesus, because he is the one who transforms the inside and then brings us outside. So no matter what people say to us, our inside is transformed, so it cannot be manipulated. We cannot be taken away from that. And it gives us that chance to still our hearts, to then go to the people who we know that we can trust, people in your cruise right now around you. And we want to encourage you to have that conversation and to really instill the words of Jesus and good voices around you to make sure that our influence is one that's going to be pointing to him and is going to be lasting. Amen. So we're going to leave you with it. There's going to be a few questions that come up on the screen. But yeah, pray that you have a great week. Love you all. Thanks for tuning in.